I'm Lori Bush-Shepard, Vice President of Marketing at Mobify, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our discussion today on building a winning 2018 retail strategy with progressive web apps. Our panelists today are Richard Fouts, Director of Thought Leadership at Sapient Razorfish, and Peter McLaughlin, Chief Product Officer at Mobify. I'm afraid Richard's having a little technical difficulty today, so I will be advancing his slides. My name is Lori Bush-Shepard, and I will be your host. Some housekeeping details before we get started. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A button that you'll see on your Zoom dashboard. You can also private chat messages to us. Either one of them work on the Zoom dashboard. If you'd like to keep up with it on Twitter, just use the @Mobify tag so that we can follow along and follow your questions. And also, this webinar is being recorded. You'll get a link via email to the on-demand playback, and we really encourage you to share it with your colleagues. And now some background on our topic. With 2018 right around the corner, planning a retail strategy that delivers both immediate wins and long-term success can feel pretty daunting. But you can do just that by planning your digital transformation from a mobile-first perspective. In today's session, whether you're planning a digital retail transformation for 2018 or just looking to drive quick wins on mobile, you'll learn how to build a successful strategy by leading with progressive web apps and accelerated mobile pages. So here's our agenda for today. We'll be discussing how emerging retail technologies will reduce shopper friction in 2018, how mobile revenue trends are changing, and how to build a winning 2018 strategy for progressive web apps. And to get us started, it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Fouts from Sapient Razorfish, who'll give us an understanding on the changing state of mobile. Richard?
Well, thank you, Lori. And you know, given the tremendous price visibility we have thanks to the internet, we're all competing on customer experience. And as we migrate to digital business, we're evaluating technologies that blend the physical and the digital experience, which is our definition of digital business. But we're also blending the customer-employee experience for a pretty simple reason, because mountains of data prove year after year that when employees have the tool to do a good job, they are more satisfied, which automatically leads to satisfied customers. You'll never reach high customer satisfaction if your employees are struggling to do their job. On the next slide, you know, we've always, typically had to choose between investments in employee versus customer experience. But with today's technologies, we can make investments that benefit both. So it's good news for us, those of us that need to construct sound business cases for every investment we make, because if we can expand the number of constituents that benefit, we can show higher return. Next slide brings us to our agenda. Well, what do I mean by friction? This is important because friction is anything, of course, the obvious, that puts anything in the way of the buyer's decision-making process, especially time. And the operative word there is decision-making. We have found that when we construct customer journey maps as a series of decisions and approach friction as anything that interferes with the buyer's ability to make a decision along the way, that creates friction. So if you can help a buyer make an informed decision in less time, that is one way to reduce friction. Let's take a look at, this is not comprehensive, but I just selected a few technologies in the short term and then some of those in the longer term that are truly transformative. If we go to the next slide, so the news around digital coupons, of course, is beacon technology. If a shopper has your app on their phone that is beacon enabled and they approach a beacon within the store, it can trigger a message to appear on their device. Now, this could trigger a coupon, reward points, or information about a particular product. And some analysts I talked to say that $4 billion worth of U.S. retail sales is already being influenced by beacons. These, of course, are small Bluetooth-enabled transmitters. Some estimates predict that 4.5 million beacons will be deployed by 2018. That's an increase of 9 times in just 3 years. And some of the vendors you can look at in this space are Radius Networks, a vendor called Blue Cat, GP Shopper, and G-Cell. If we go to the next slide, I know that consumers have been somewhat slow to use digital wallets for point of sale transactions. I kind of compare this to how online banking deployed. But what's instructive about digital payments is that they do indeed play a role in reducing friction. And when I see people using a digital wallet, I'll ask them how they like it. And the answer I get back the most is, well, there are certain times when I want to go out, but I just don't want to carry my wallet with me. Some of you may have explored the convenience of using a mobile wallet service, Apple Pay, Android Pay, or Samsung Pay. And although the usage rates from Apple Pay have slightly increased this year, Samsung Pay appears to have a clear advantage simply because its users know that it is accepted at virtually every retailer. And that's important because sometimes it can be confusing to know which wallet is used at which merchant. If we go to the next slide, electronic shelf labels, these are huge in Europe. Whenever I travel to Scandinavia on business, or Germany, or even the UK, I find these all over the place. They've been slower to adopt in the US. Kroger's, however, is one store that credits ESLs with fewer expired products, since they monitor when products are almost out of date and need to be replaced or can even be discounted. Fewer out of stock, and of course planogram compliance, since ESLs, electronic shelf labels, can notify associates where misplaced products fit into the original planogram. But the message here is that shoppers really appreciate what they perceive as to be accurate, reliable pricing, and at the very least, they give the store a sophisticated look that is equipped for 21st century retailing. So with ESLs, you can display pricing or promotional information in real time using programmable wireless tools. And you can quickly see which promotionals are working. And with Bluetooth enabled ESLs, you can present offers based on that customer's location. And it's all run by enterprise software from a single server at your headquarters. When I had my car serviced at Lexus last week, I noticed all the cars had electronic price tags. And I talked to the dealer manager, and he said that basically the same benefit applies here, especially price consistency between what they see online, what they might see offline. Nothing annoys a buyer more than seeing inconsistent pricing. If we go to the next slide, let's get into some things that are a little more transformative. Augmented reality. Now, I know this can feel a little gimmicky for a lot of you, and sometimes it is, and you have to be careful of that, because again, we come back to this central question of how will this help you make a decision? If you want to understand the business problem AR solves, take a trip over to an IKEA store, and their tool is a lot of fun. You can see how furniture will look in your room. You don't even have to go to an IKEA store to use it. You can see if something fits, for example. So I would say, you know, with the release of iOS 11, I see a lot of developers are in the early stages of figuring out just how to exploit value with Apple's AR kit. So again, if you look at your situation, can AR, by floating information over reality, textual information or other digital information, if that helps your buyer make a decision, an informed decision more quickly, then it could be something you look at. Interestingly enough, when I talk to clients about AR, those conversations inevitably seem to dovetail into wearables. And of course, this is a new way to reach consumers, especially if these devices are equipped with location services, which can be used to message shoppers to, say, stop in and consider a product they're interested in. You see this quote here, this is from eMarketer, that you know, buyers are warming up to the idea of making a purchase to their wearable. And if you're an Apple Watch user, you know, you can order food through any number of apps like Grubhub or Domino's or burritos from Chipotle. But wearables, this is a technology to watch for everyone, simply because more and more phone functions are sure to migrate to watches, glasses, clothing, even our cars, which many describe as a giant wearable. Interestingly enough, John Hancock, it's a great case study. You see, they were one of the first companies to give policyholders a discount when they use Fitbits, you know, for exercise tracking, and policyholders can also earn points for physical activity or other healthy living choices, and they can apply those points for rate discounts or other rewards. So as we enter the IoT era, we're going to see a lot of clever startups, just a lot of clever retailers start to use this data that is being generated from things to give advice to customers before and after the sale. Lori, if we could move to conversational interfaces. Now, I always say this delivers the ultimate frictionless experience. And of course, you know, Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp have largely started to propel this. But the era in which we place an order by just speaking a few words to an AI agent or sending a short message to a chatbot to quickly solve a customer service issue, that day has arrived. In conversational commerce, we're seeing it in use at Winecutter Flowers, Harry and David, even Fannie Mae, and the Popcorn Factory are all using cognitive computing and AI to interact with consumers more seamlessly and naturally. A fun case study I came across was Jazz Electronics. If you're like most retailers, you know it's difficult to service a large volume of requests. And that's just what conversational computing really offers us, is a way to scale one-to-one personal conversations. At Jazz Electronics, they have an AI-powered sales advisor. It emulates a chat window, will answer questions and direct shoppers to the product that suits their needs. I think customer service, because you already have a tremendous amount of content that you can ingest into an AI engine, this is one of those sort of low-hanging fruit. At Jazz Electronics, they have a natural language processor that interprets the questions. An inference engine moves the conversation forward. It was developed by NoHold, and this is a clever product because anyone can use NoHold to create a chatbot using Microsoft Word or Google Docs. And so it's an approach that small businesses with limited resources can easily adopt. Other vendors in this space include Cognitive Code in Los Angeles, Drastin, also in California, D-R-A-S-T-I-N. Fido.ai, this is a really fun company which sells an agent known as Ada. And then there's Semantic Machines, another vendor in Massachusetts. Let's move to the next slide. When you combine real-time monitoring, for example, with customer analytics, this is truly a transformative technology. Real-time monitoring could consume its own webinar, but given my time constraints, this is a technology that impacts everything from retail operations and buyer engagement to inventory management and fulfillment. Basically, a real-time monitoring platform will display a data feed with data that's generated both inside and outside the store onto a dashboard to provide you a single view of what is happening in and around your store. Dwell time, for example, measures time spent in the same position. For example, we know from these systems that dwell time at U.S. airports has reached an all-time high, nearly 70 minutes. Look at products from vendors such as ShopperTrack, Retail Next, or CountWise. In fact, if you go on YouTube and just search on CountWise, you'll see some pretty interesting case studies, one of a library. Another provider, Prism, essentially turns cameras into IoT sensors that can anonymously monitor behavior inside stores. And then it's presented in a variety of visualizations that can quickly identify both problems and recommend solutions. If you want to get educated in real-time monitoring, check out the blog from Retail Next. It's really well done and very informative. Let's go to, let's see, Lori, did I skip my analytics slide? Lori, you there?
Yep, we haven't skipped any slides.
Okay. If
Yep.
we go to the next slide, what do you see?
The real-time monitoring solutions.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. And what do you see?
They'll offer unique experiences.
Making the customer part of the design process?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So this is, if you take a walk down Newbury Street in Boston, you'll see a store called Ministry of Supply. This was founded by 3 MIT students who are set on making a company a leader in 3D printing technology by experimenting with what we call in-store automated manufacturing. And this year, Ministry of Supply installed a machine in its Boston store that can make a garment on demand in about 90 minutes. and the machine can also be instructed to make a garment that is specific to a customer's design. So this isn't for everybody, but if you're a seller of high margin custom products, such as Ministry of Supply, you can think about how 3D printing will help you print small products, or print products in small quantities rather, to get quick reactions to which products will drive demand and which will not. Now, the good news here is that 3D printers are starting as low as $500. You can look at vendors such as Quantum Materials, Rise, R-I-Z-E. They sell a $26,000 printer, but it produces robust parts with strength that most 3D printers have not been able to achieve. Then there's Form Labs in Massachusetts. Also, probably the most well-known in this space is Stratasys. They've been around for a long time. And Lori, does that bring us to my final slide? What can you do right now to reduce friction?
It sure does.
Lori, you there? Okay. So my advice here is to start crafting a business plan that, of course, integrates your buyer's preferences for mobility, collaboration, and easy access to information with your digital workplace. Now, one thing we haven't talked about are products that help you merge your customer experience with your employee experience. Companies like Reflexis or JDA Software have got some nice solutions for making this merger happen. I mean, if you think about it, your employees don't go anywhere without their phone either. So it's their preferred interface for doing their job. So this is what I advise is when you construct your business plan, really pull in the customer experience with the employee experience. A lot of companies say, by putting employees first, customers follow. And of course, bring HR leaders into your plan because you're going to have some gaps, between current capabilities and your vision for being a 21st century retailer. And so it's really important to get HR involved and start to identify just where the training gaps are and where you need to update job descriptions. And of course, you can learn more. This slide just shows you some of the articles that can be pretty informative about where retail is going. And of course, one way to reduce shopping friction is to give mobile browsers features that were previously exclusive to apps. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Lori.
Great, and we'll welcome Peter McLaughlin, our Chief Product Officer, to talk through how mobile revenue trends are changing. Peter?
Thank you for the introduction, Lori. Everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. I want to start by talking about the changing digital landscape. For some of you, this will be a review, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we move through this presentation. Most retailers are getting most of their traffic on mobile rather than desktop. If you add up minutes spent, most retailers are getting more digital engagement on mobile than on any other digital channel. And if you're not there yet, you're going to be pretty soon. On average, growth on desktop is either flat or declining for most retailers I talk to, same for tablet. So mobile's really the only digital channel right now that has natural growth. We're beginning to see signs of life on the conversational commerce side of things as well, but it's still very early days, and mobile is the dominant channel that we see growing this year. And mobile is converting on average at about 1/3 of desktop. And I don't think you need to be a mathematician to see that this is going to make growth targets very difficult for retailers to achieve over the next couple of years when your only growth channel is not converting nearly as well as channels that are flat or in decline. I feel the retail industry has been conditioned to accept the low mobile conversion rates as a harsh reality that we just need to live with, but I think nothing could be further from the case. Consider this. Mobify's average customer is doing more than double the industry average conversion rate on mobile. Also, leading customers are seeing conversion rates similar to desktop for specific promotional activities, and we believe this trend is going to continue as we find new ways to reduce friction. And this is all about friction. That's what Richard has been sharing about is the different ways that you can remove friction from different parts of the shopping journey. So let's talk about how we remove friction for mobile shopping using progressive web apps. Before I do that, however, I do want to spend a moment just to talk about what are some of the key problems that we see with mobile today and why isn't it converting well. And to connect the story back to friction, it's largely about what are the key friction points that are happening in the mobile experience today that are blocking people from buying. At a high level, it's three things: performance, usage patterns, and user input challenges. I could do a 2-hour webinar just on those problems. And in fact, there's a lot of talented UX specialists who have done 2-hour webinars on those problems. And if you're familiar with, say, Luke Robleski from Google Product Management, you may have seen some of his talks on the subject matter. So I'm going to do a brief overview. There's a lot more material on this subject. If you're interested, check out Mobify's insights reports. We can provide you with a lot more details about where you're going to encounter challenges during the checkout funnel. Now, in terms of the 3 key challenges I'm going to talk about today, the first is speed. You can never really have enough of it. A lot of us who design these experiences live in cities and have up-to-date mobile devices, but more than half of the US still accesses the mobile internet on 3G network speeds, either because of the device they're using, interference from buildings, or because they live in a rural service area. Speed is the measure that I can most closely correlate with a better conversion rate. If your experience is faster, more visitors will convert, period. Second, people's usage patterns on mobile phones is different. Most sites focus on a like-for-like reproduction of the desktop website on mobile, and this does not provide the best possible mobile experience. And for mobile visitors, only the best possible experience will do. Now you need to remember who your competition is here. It's the best of the industry. You're competing with Amazon, you're competing with eBay, you're competing with AliExpress. Your traditional competitive set is less relevant now than it was in the past. And finally, everybody knows that it sucks to type on our devices. Mobify is a technology that lets us look at the funnel drop-off through a checkout at every form field. It's amazing to watch another 20% of potential buyers walk away with every additional form that they need to fill out. And keep in mind, these are people who started the checkout. So they literally put up their hand and said, I want to buy this, and then they gave up. So imagine half the people who tried to buy your products in your stores gave up trying to check out. That sounds like something that you spend money to fix. And I think that's something that is very reasonable for us to spend money as an industry to fix on mobile. Responsive tech was a game changer, at least when you compared it to the desktop sites that existed before it. Responsive helped the industry move forward and support the mobile user, but it doesn't help truly optimize for the mobile user, as the responsive key philosophy is that mobile is a screen that's just like the desktop screen, but smaller. So it's really just about laying things out in a single column. The average responsive e-commerce site takes nearly 20 seconds to load, and that's the statistic from Google. They've got the data to prove it. Responsive experiences usually just reflow this content down, so it's not reducing the amount of content, not reducing the size of images that are transferred over the wire. I had one retailer tell me their homepage was nearly 5 feet tall when he printed it. What's all that content even doing? Is there any reasonable expectation that a mobile visitor is going to view 5 feet of content by scrolling up and down? Most experiences that are designed for the phones focus a lot more on side-to-side swiping as opposed to up and down scrolling. And this is a metaphor that's very suitable for the portrait layout of how most people hold their phones, but it's something that very few sites explore, and it isn't really possible with, say, a responsive approach. A lot of retail apps have boasted about great conversion rates. They have such limited reach. Only 5% of retail shoppers will install most retail native apps. Across the industry, we also see a new phenomenon that's called app fatigue. And with app fatigue, we're seeing that most consumers, and this is data from Google again, that most consumers have installed 0 apps in the past 60 days. Unless your shoppers are transacting with you multiple times per month, it's going to be a very difficult proposition to get them to go through the funnel breaking app install process and then actually keep that app on their phone. So a lot of people are regularly going through and deleting apps that they don't use regularly so that they can reclaim the space on the phone that they need for other things like music and videos, etc. The native apps on mobile do give us a good reason to know that if we make the mobile web experience great too, we should expect great conversion rates as an outcome. Progressive web apps are how we make the web experience great. More people are getting familiar with the term progressive web apps, or PWAs for short. The goal is to give shoppers an experience that was designed for their phone as a primary consideration, but has the reach, searchability, and linkability of the web. Google can crawl progressive web apps. Your SEM campaign can target content inside of progressive web apps. In short, everything that used to work still works, except your customers get an experience that's 10 times better without having to go through a funnel-breaking app store install process. This is mobile nirvana. Let's have a quick look at what this means for shoppers. Yes, all your content is indexable by search, And although Google doesn't give PWAs a special boost in their ranking separately, they do love fast content, and great PWAs are fast. So you can typically expect a healthy SEO boost after you launch. Overall, the experience is usually 2 to 4 times faster than your responsive site, and we're finding ways to make them faster still. There are no page transitions in a PWA. The experience changes the second a shopper touches it. As I go through each of the features of Progressive Web App, the common theme that you'll see here is that we're focused on removing friction throughout the shopping journey. An app without a notification would only really be half an app. The shopper's expectation is that they're going to receive timely information through their devices, and that is going to present itself in the notification center of their environment of iOS or Android. The average click-through rate for web push notifications is 9.8%, and the click-through rate for push notifications triggered by cart abandonment is 18%. We see conversion rates on abandonment click-through as high as 15%. 15% conversion rate on mobile. Seems impossible, but it isn't. For many retailers, that's enough reclaimed revenue to pay for the entire PWA project once they have sufficient subscribers to form a base for sending these notifications. Progressive Web App wouldn't be app-like if it couldn't also be installed. No app store required, so you can get rid of that whole funnel-busting app store install. You just need to prompt the user, and it gets installed on their home screen. If they go in and they want to delete it later, no problem, they can do that. Then you can ask them to install it again at a future point. All of this takes up a fraction of the space on their phone as a typical native app, which are these days running between 100 and 200 megabytes, where we're talking a few hundred kilobytes for the typical Progressive Web App. So massive difference in terms of size. It's not going to show up when they go looking for which app is using up all of their disk space. It's not even going to show up on the list. Something else that's great about native apps, they're always branded and they always load, even when there's no connection. Offline mode means your customers never get an unbranded experience and can continue to shop pages they visited and items that have been pre-cached without their connection. And this is great for minor disruptions such as elevators, tunnels, bad Wi-Fi, and other daily connection problems that break the mobile shopping journey. Remember, most mobile shopping is taking place in found time. So that's the minute of the minute that your shoppers have between other activities. Anything you can do to prevent that experience from being disrupted is worth doing. It all adds up to a conversion rate at the end of the day. Accelerated mobile pages, or AMP for short, are a new way that Google's introduced to make the mobile web load almost instantly from search engine result pages or SEM targets. AMP and a PWA combine together to give you what I call start fast, stay fast. Even on 3G with older phones, our AMP experiences are loading in just over a second. Compare that to close to 20 seconds for the typical responsive site. We're talking about a factor of 20 improvement. When you consider how many people abandon, up to 50% of visitors are abandoning a site on mobile if it takes more than 5 seconds to load, and you can see why these technologies play well together to create an experience that's going to convert massively better than responsive websites. Another nice aspect of the accelerated mobile page technology is that it gives us hooks to allow us to preload the Progressive Web App in the background. So that's the stay fast part. Once we've got the AMP page loaded, we preload the Progressive Web App experience, and now we've got a rich experience on the visitor's phone that's already loaded so that they can enjoy it however good their connection speed is. AMP and PWAs are a whole new way of doing things, and we could think of this as Web 3.0. It's already changing the way that commerce takes place on the web, and it's going to have an even bigger impact as we go into in the next 6 to 12 months. So hopefully at this point you can see why you'd want a Progressive Web App. So now let me tell you a little bit about how you can get one. First, web apps are not websites. Building a web app is a lot more like building a native application than it is like building a website. You're going to need new tools, new technologies, and an experienced team to succeed. Or you could look at a platform that's going to do this for you. You need to consider time, budget, and your strategy for getting there, and how you're going to work with third-party marketing technologies, because this is all quite a new space. In terms of budget planning, you should ask yourself, even if you can do a PWA inexpensively, should you? Data from Google, McKinsey, and others repeatedly shows that speed and quality of digital properties affects how consumers perceive your brand. This is your most important digital experience. the one where your digital visitors are spending the most minutes, this is a place where doing it as cheaply as possible is probably not going to be the best business decision. Every customer that we've launched has had a revenue lift from their PWAs. And you can use a business case to understand your payback period, and Mobify can help you build that business case. We've run those models hundreds of times, and we can walk your data gurus through every step of the math. I invite you to challenge our data team with your own analytics and ask questions and let us explain to you how the model works. When building a business case, Mobify uses an economic model that will also factor out natural organic growth in mobile. But we're conservative by default. I want every surprise that my customers have to be a happy one. When considering when to invest, consider that the data shows the outcomes of double or more responsive conversion rates are possible on mobile today. So your business case will show you what you're leaving on the table every month. There's a few concerns that often come up around timing and other projects that are going on. PWAs do not have to be a large time commitment for your team. If you're working with a vendor like Mobify, we'll introduce you to a systems integrator who both fits your needs and would be able to deliver largely with minimal interaction from your team. So for example, we've done PWA launches for customers that consumed as little as 40 hours of their team's time over a 12-week period. We've also found in practice that PWA projects pair very well with e-commerce replatforming, and we've helped several customers do this already. This is a great way to lead a digital transformation project, as it gives you an immediate, tangible revenue boost, but it's low risk. And that makes it easier to transition services in the background. You've essentially created an abstraction layer for your front-end experiences. And as you migrate services like product information feeds, payment acquisition over to a new platform or to APIs through your digital transformation, you can do that one step at a time without risking big changes that will directly affect your shoppers. You might also want to consider the seasonality of your business and make sure you've got a PWA ready in time for your next peak season. Waiting is costly. Keep in mind that for most large retailers, waiting even a month is leaving probably multiple millions of dollars on the table, which is more than a typical PWA project is going to cost. There's 180 degrees of difference between building a website and building apps. With PWAs, you're doing all the work you would do to build a native app, but you're building it using a web stack of technologies, and that's a new process for most teams. This is a real application. That means all the state and interactions are happening inside of the app. If you wouldn't normally build software from scratch with your team, you should be looking at partnering. You'll need a plan to have all of your team members, front-end, back-end, and full-stack engineers trained on new paradigms and new tool chains. Say that getting your caching architecture right is hard is an understatement. You can spend thousands of hours just on this part of the project alone. So a little bit of my background. I'm from a computer science background originally. I left my PhD to work on Mobify, so I feel credentialed to tell this bad computer science joke. They say there's only two hard problems in computer science. First is naming things, the second is caching, and the third is off by one errors. Hopefully that got a couple of chuckles, but mostly I think it's just us nerds that are laughing at that one. Progressive web apps can be incredibly fast. They don't come that way automatically. So PWAs are applications. Applications need to boot when the visitors first arrive on the first page of your site. That booting process requires a sophisticated understanding of mobile web performance if you're going to make it fast. Consider that even Amazon, one of the fastest sites on the internet, only gets a 64 out of 100 on mobile performance tests from Google's PageSpeed Insights, whereas our customers are often scoring between 90 and 100. Final consideration. You're going to need to measure your PWA success, and that means analytics as well as third-party tracking beacons. You've built the PWA and implemented offline mode. Did your team think about how those analytics or your third-party marketing JavaScript tools are actually going to work for tracking in offline mode? Most third-party integrations, including analytics, were not built from the perspective of running in the PWA context. With PWAs, it's important that a central dispatch event system manages state changes inside of the application and notifies relevant third parties at the right time, or holds back that information if the device is online until connectivity is restored. There's an old saying in software that the first 90% of a project takes the first 90% of the work, the last 10% takes the other 90%. Details like analytics in the progressive web apps context are a real world examples of where those edge cases can unexpectedly burn hundreds or thousands of hours of project time, unless you have a platform that's already solved these problems for you. Mobify has pre-built connectors for Salesforce Commerce Cloud and Hybris and can integrate with all the other major e-commerce platforms. We've also integrated with all the major third-party marketing technologies with out-of-the-box connectors that are going to save time for your project and eliminate risk. Just to summarize, I advocate for a batteries included option, which is how Mobify's platform works, something that is pre-built with the best of breed UX metaphors already integrated that makes it very easy to create a great experience. And most importantly, a way that you can consistently do that in a way that you're going to have a predictable outcome. There's more to a great PWA than the PWA itself. It's about how you start fast with, say, an accelerated mobile page, how you stay fast with the PWA, how you re-engage those customers with timely push notifications, how you drive them into the native apps if you need in-store experiences, and of course, how are you going to do payment acquisition, integration with digital wallets, and other ways that you're going to take advantage of these new technologies to reduce shopper friction. The new Lancome USA site was one of the first to incorporate a lot of cutting-edge mobile web technologies from Mobify, including accelerated mobile pages, a PWA, and push messaging. In May, Lancome won the IRC Award for Mobile Commerce Excellence, which placed eBay in second place. Winning this award was an amazing outcome for our team at Mobify and a reflection of 10 years of experience we have in designing and building for phones. Thank you so much for your time. We're ready for questions.
Yep, thank you. We do have a few questions that have come in through direct chat and also some through the QA tab. You can enter them either way or on Twitter using the @Mobify tag. Just to start things off, I do want to let folks know that you are getting the recording. So just be watching your email in the next couple of days. That will include the statistics and data points. There was a question that came in regarding the data points being shared after the webinar, and yes, they will be. So just watch your email and feel free to share that with your colleagues. We have a question that came in on direct chat. I'll toss it over to Peter first, but then maybe Richard, you might want to chime in afterward. I'm overwhelmed by the concept of digital transformation. Is there a crawl, walk, run strategy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the tricky part of a digital transformation project usually is that it involves a rip and replace of every part of the infrastructure. It depends on the situation that you have coming into it, of course, but a lot of retailers are in a circumstance where they have a large monolithic e-commerce platform that has very limited APIs available. So the approach I'd recommend is we see this explosion of change in the front end. PWAs and AMP are one part of it, but coming soon, we have chat commerce, which is already a phenomenon and growing rapidly. I think watches will probably be a phenomenon that takes off the next couple of years. How are you going to support all of those? I think that you need an abstraction layer for the front end. That means that you're really able to swap out services in the background. So initially that abstraction layer talks to your current monolith. And as you go through a transition process, as you bring in new technologies, move to a service-oriented architecture in the back end, you could do that one service at a time and just rewire that front-end abstraction layer to speak to the new services as they come online. That way you don't have this moment of panic when you have to pull the switch and switch everything off and move over to an entirely new architecture that's taken you, maybe 12 or 18 months or 2 years to build.
Great. Richard, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about digital transformation, it really means this blended experience. We have online marketing, we have digital marketing, and then we have other marketing. That's got to go. No more digital marketing manager. It's just marketing. And one of the best ways to start this journey is just with journey mapping and look at how does your buyer make decisions in your physical store with the help of digital tools. And when you start to do that, then you can start to create a vision for this blended experience.
Great. Thank you very much. Another question that came in: what web stack does Mobify use? Peter?
We use a stack that in the front end consists of React, Redux, and in the back end Node.js with some support from.
Great, thank you. Then hand this one over to Richard. Which of these technologies will improve the bottom line in holiday shopping 2018?
Which technology will improve a holiday shopping? Well, you know, this is where real-time store monitoring comes in, because now you can actually start to see, you know, how much traffic are you really capturing. I mean, one of the great things about the real-time store monitoring is you can see like 100 people went by your store in the last X number of minutes, and you brought in 7 of them. But the day before you brought in 9. You know, you can start to see, you know, what's happening. Or you can see that yesterday 100 people went by the store in a certain amount of time and you brought in 7. But now 200 people went by and you brought in 5. So just having that kind of information can really help you understand which promotionals are working and which might not be working. Just understanding, you know, cold spots and warm spots and hot spots inside your store is just tremendously informative. So, you know, I would really look at products from Retail Next and from Countwise, because these vendors really are pioneering this whole idea of the blended digital physical experience.
Peter, anything you'd like to add?
I think Richard got it.
All right. All right, so here's another one. How long does it take to deploy progressive web apps?
So a typical project for Mobify is about 3 months. The anecdotal sort of conversations I've had in the field with some people who've done it themselves is about 12 to 18 months is a more typical timeline for an in-house build. So those are just a couple of data points. We've done everything from 2 months to 4 months, depending on the size of the project.
Site, what do I do now? Peter, did I lose you?
Still here. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Okay. Sure, we just did a responsive site. What do I do now?
So typically, what you're going to want to do is look at what is going to be the return on the progressive web app investment. So, you know, have a look at your responsive site. You probably made a bunch of improvements that are applying to your desktop channel as well when you did that responsive rebuild. So you're not going to lose that work by going to the PWA, but you may want to enhance it by launching the PWA as well, if the business case makes sense. So you're going to have a look at what are your conversion rate numbers today on mobile, how is that going, and work on a business case to understand whether or not you would see a substantial increase by moving to a progressive web app. Even for modern responsive sites, there typically is a lot of gain to be had because the technologies are quite fundamentally different. But run the numbers and let the math decide.
Great, thank you. Richard, here's one for you. Do you think retailers need to invest in multiple conversational interfaces, or is there a top 1 or 2 we should focus on?
Well, when it comes to conversational interfaces, where we are right now is using things like Facebook Messenger, and I think that's really where you know, Facebook Messenger has become the preferred means of communication on mobile devices. You know, messaging apps surpassed social apps in global popularity a couple of years ago. And so this is really where the low-hanging fruit is in messaging. It's not true verbal conversation, but just using your apps like Messenger to communicate to a brand. I mean, I think now you can go into the Facebook Messenger and request a car, and you know, it's integrated with Uber. So that's always a good place to start, is just through messaging. If you want to move into conversation, you know, this is where it gets a little trickier. You've got Alexa, you know, skills that can be trained. You've got Siri, but that area is going to take a little more time, and it's a little fragmented right now. So that's where, you know, if you talk to Fido.ai or you talk to Cognitive Code, vendors like that, and you want to get a whole strategy together as to how you can create conversational commerce or conversational interfaces through messaging and through the spoken word. They can help you understand where this technology is going. But the low-hanging fruit truly is in chatbots for customer service, simply because you've already got tons of information that can be ingested into an AI agent. It's really two pieces. There's the AI, the natural language processor, the natural language generator, which creates an answer to a question, and then the inference engine, which infers what is the customer really asking.
Great, thank you. And we've got one last question came in on the direct line. Peter, this one's for you. You mentioned about analytics tools not measuring progressive web apps. Is this something that Mobify does?
And so Mobify, we do have our own analytics engine, a real-time analytics engine at Mobify, but it's focused a lot on your mobile performance. Our goal is not to replace a Google Analytics or a Site Catalyst or a Core Metrics, but our goal is to facilitate having those tools work well inside of the progressive web app environment. Just to clarify, those tools can work inside of a progressive web app. The issue is with the events that they expect to fire and the differences in the environment, because effectively a progressive web app is all happening on a single page from end to end. So from the moment you start the experience to the moment you leave the experience, you're actually all inside of the same page. And that's a different model than most analytics tools are used to, and it requires some customization. So that's something that we facilitate through our analytics connector, and of course, brokering connectivity issues such as offline mode.
Great. Oh, actually, we did just get one more, a couple more. How does the PWA work in the iOS system?
So let's do, I think, a little myth busting around this. There is more functionality a progressive web app can do on the Android side than on iOS in terms of features. We actually see better results from a PWA on iOS than we do on Android. So we can do pre-caching, we can do instant page transitions, we can boot and run the app on iOS. Basically all the important stuff that makes a great experience. We could do a little bit more on the Android side. We get push notifications on the Android side. We believe those are coming to iOS Safari soon, because iOS is formally committed to a roadmap to adding something called the service worker, which is the technical component that we need in the web browser in order to power push notifications. So they've publicly announced that they're going to be adding service worker to iOS Safari. We expect to see that in 2018. So expect to see more parity between the Android and iOS environments coming up in the next 6 months. Today, we see our best results on iOS, so expect that they'll just get even better tomorrow.
Okay, great. And then once you've implemented with Mobify's tools, how hard is it to change the user experience subsequently and for post the initial project?
So it depends on what aspect of the user experience that you plan to change. If it's things like content, we provide things called smart content slots that give a graphic user interface to your marketing team to be able to manage and modify parts of the experience, or we can integrate with your existing experience manager, say you're using AEM or some other experience system, then that can be integrated. So if you're just talking about changes of content or contextual content for the user, we got you covered with more or less automated tools or tools that could be used by marketing teams directly. If you're looking at, for example, developing new parts of the buying journey or changing major parts of the buying journey flow, Mobify provides an SDK as well as training for your developers to be able to make those changes to that experience. So because we provide boilerplate for how pretty much any commerce interaction or function would, for how those would work inside of the PWA environment, you have a great place to get started. And it's typically something that any retail technology team can get ramped up on. We also provide out-of-the-box components, something called the component library. And that component library includes components for pretty much anything that's part of a typical retail buying experience.
Great. It looks like there's one last question. How do Mobify's tools work with our CMS, our content management system. And so, for example, AEM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our preferred mechanism for integrating with content is to hook directly into the APIs of the CMS and pipe the content into predefined content areas inside of the experience. Recognize that not everyone has a CMS that's designed for this kind of headless operation. So in which case, we do have a fallback system that allows us to scrape content out of the CMS and inject it in the appropriate parts of the PWA. Both ways are actually quite fast. In fact, I wouldn't say that one way is faster than the other, but we do prefer the APIs from the perspective that it's a little bit more maintainable.
Great. Well, thank you. We've made it through all of our questions. I really appreciate everyone joining us today for the webinar. And just a reminder, it has been recorded and will be made available for on-demand playback. We hope you found it to be informative and helpful. Thank you very much for joining us, and many thanks to Richard and Peter for your time today.
My pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, Laurie.